Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is Jean-Baptiste Jean-Villemer, who's a researcher in international law at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. Welcome to the France 24 interview.
Thank you.
You're the author of a book just published in France, which I will translate as War in the Name of Humanity, Kill or Let Die. It's a very thorough book about what a just war is, what a humanitarian war is. It's a concept that's been bandied around for several years. What, according to you, is a just war in 2012?
Well, first of all, that concept is not new, and it has not been here for the last years, but I would say thousands of years. And in the first historical chapter, I go back to the ancient China, 4,000 years ago, which developed the same kind of rhetorics that we've seen more recently with the Bush administration in Iraq in 2003, the rhetoric of liberation. What I call
the freedom agenda.
The freedom agenda, yeah. What I call a war in the name of humanity. It's a tricky title because I don't really defend that kind of formulation. Carl Schmitt said, whoever invokes humanity wants to hide something. If you, because it's never humanity who wage war. It's always a state who uses a concept, humanity, as an excuse to wage war.
Abuses the concept, one should say then.
Yes, because by definition it's never humanity itself which engage into a war. It's only a concept which is used. So there's no war in the name of humanity. It's only states using humanity as an excuse to engage war for most of all national interests. And it can be humanitarian reasons as well. And my point is that it's not incompatible. It's not because you may have several reasons to go to war. One of them is humanitarian. You have also national interest reasons, egoistic reasons to go to war, and this one does not annihilate, cancel the first one.
But according to you, if I understand correctly, there's no pure humanitarian war. It doesn't exist.
Absolutely. In the just war tradition, there is one criterion, which is the good intention, the recta intentio in Latin, the good intention criterion, and that criterion is the only one that I reject in the book, because we can never prove what is the intention of a state, first of all, and second of all, because by definition my axiom is that a state would intervene only if it is in its interest to do so. It doesn't mean that it has not a humanitarian reason to intervene as well, but it means that this is at least mixed motives.
Right. I mean, this concept really emerged again after the end of the Cold War with the intervention in Somalia, which was described as a quote-unquote humanitarian intervention. And then there's been the Iraq War, and the most recent example of a so-called intervention in the name of humanity, in that case, the civilians population, was in Libya.
Yes.
Would you describe this as a just war?
Yes, I think so. Once again, it doesn't mean that there was no national interest to go there. And what's interesting, if you compare the political speeches of Obama, Cameron, and Sarkozy at that time, is that both Obama and Cameron, they say we have several reasons to go to war in Libya. One of them is humanitarian. We need to avoid a massacre in Benghazi. But we have also national interest to do so, because we can't let Gaddafi destabilize the entire region. And as well, we need to control the oil network. And that was not something hidden in the US and in the UK. But here in France, the official reason was only we go to war only to defend human rights. And this is quite hypocritical, because we very well know that we always have another interest to go to war. And this is maybe, if you want to compare Libya and Syria, what explains the difference between the two cases.
Right, because obviously there's a lot of talk about Syria. I want to get immediately to Syria, but just before, on Libya, there was a United Nations resolution,
Yes.
the Security Council,
Yes.
which enabled the intervention. It was to protect, the responsibility to protect, a
Yes.
concept that took a lot of time to be forged, which is now recognized by the UN. But for instance, Russia and China said it had been abused in this case, and probably explains their attitude now on the Syrian dossier. I mean, do you think this responsibility to protect is something that really can work in the international community?
Well, the responsibility to protect R2P, which been around since 2001 and accepted by the UN summit in 2005, was used in political speeches around that resolution, but not in the resolution itself. If you read carefully the 1973 resolution of the Security Council on Libya, there's no mention of responsibility to protect, except the responsibility of the Libyan regime to protect its own population, but nothing about an external responsibility of the so-called international community to protect the Libyan population if the Libyan regime fails to do so. So I would be careful about that progress. This is more a political call than a legal reality. R2P is not something which is really existing, legally speaking. It's more a moral incentive to act, and it's not really used today in Syria because we have more prudential reasons not to go to war there.
Right. One of the reasons invoked, as I said, by the Russians and the Chinese, they're saying the responsibility to protect concept has been used by Western powers in Libya, and they don't want to see this happen again in Syria, so there's nothing happening at the Security Council.
Yes, because they think, as many people, that there's been an abuse because Resolution 1973 did not include
regime change.
Regime change, right. But what the Resolution 1973 said is all means necessary, use all means necessary to protect civilians. So the question is, could you protect civilians without regime change in Libya? And I think
they say no.
I think it was not possible to protect civilians
Right.
without regime change. So regime change was not an end in itself, but it was a means to an end. So this is not a regime change intervention like was the American intervention in Iraq in 2003, but that was a humanitarian intervention in Libya, which implied regime change as a means for humanitarian reason, because it was impossible to get these humanitarian results with the same Gaddafi regime.
The problem is now, because of the Libyan precedents, you have the Syrian situation where nothing is happening.
Well, I would say this is really different, and if tomorrow the Russians agree to intervene in Syria, we'll have a great problem, because great embarrassment, because we do not want, we collectively, the other countries, contrary to what they say, we do not want to intervene in Syria for prudential reasons. This has nothing to do with international law.
What are the reasons? Can you explain?
Well, yes. In Libya, three important differences. In Libya, the country was really divided, and it was territorially divided. The army was weak, and they had no risk of regional escalation of the conflict. In Syria, it's exactly the contrary. There is an opposition, but it's too weak. It does not divide the country territorially speaking as it did in Libya. The army is much stronger, which poses the question of are we materially able to engage a new war against Syria, because NATO reached certain limits in Libya. And third, and above all, there is that great risk of regional escalation because of the link between Syria and Iran, because of the proximity of Lebanon and Israel, and the Turkish and Kurd question, and so on. So this is two different contexts, and it's not because we intervene in Libya that we have to intervene in Syria, because there's no principle of consistency that we have to respect, that we should intervene either everywhere or nowhere.
Well, the only consistency I can see is that humanitarian intervention is only possible in weak countries.
It's only possible where it has a reasonable chance of success. And in weak countries, the chance of success is higher. it's not because the country is weak. It's because if the country is stronger, then the resistance will be stronger, the conflict will last longer, the war will make more casualties.
In your book, you talk about also the need to have a responsibility to prevent rather than to protect. Is this the way to go and avoid such problems as we now see in Syria, where everything is stuck?
Well, this is the easy answer of diplomats, and the R2P concept is not only about intervention, it's about prevention, intervention, and reconstruction. But I would say everyone agrees it's very consensual to say that it's better to prevent than to cure. But the question of military intervention appears when the prevention failed. And we know that now in Syria, prevention failed. The question is more on another matter in Iran. Can we prevent a war? Maybe it's still time, but in Syria, it's probably already past that time.
Okay, just very last question. Do you think we'll see more quote-unquote humanitarian wars in the near future?
I don't think so, because the population is very skeptical about this concept, and they're right to be skeptical about it.
Okay, thank you very much for coming here and talking to us about this very intriguing concept of humanitarian wars. And thank you for watching this edition of The Interview here on France 24.